coming to the end of our one-day retreat. There's something very valuable about practicing, even if it's only for one day, but practicing continuously for many hours, sitting, walking, chanting, listening to Dhamma. It develops a certain momentum and hopefully increases your saddha, your conviction in the path of practice, in the teachings of the Buddha, and in your own capacity to practice those teachings. When I was newly arrived in Thailand, before I even ordained as a layman, I stayed at Wat Pananachat. And there on the Uposatha day, like the full moon day, new moon day and half moon days, the lay community would come into the monastery for a day and a night to practice Dhamma. Some of them would come straight from work in the evening and they would join the Sangha and practice chanting, listen to Dhamma, and then meditate through the night, finishing at dawn the next day. And some people would actually go off to work again. Of course, some people would take a rest, but many didn't. Many would sit up practicing through the night. And the Sangha would join. I remember the very first time I took part in an all-night session like that. I'd only been in the monastery a couple of days, and I asked one of the senior monks, I said, how can lay people do this, practice all night, sitting for many hours? And he said, faith, or saddha, sometimes translated as conviction. Faith in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, faith in Luang Por Chah. And then I went and asked another senior monk, I said, how do they do it? How do they sit up all night? And he answered, faith, saddha. So I asked about 3 different monks, senior monks, and they all gave the same answer. Then later I went over to Ajahn Chah's monastery, Wat Bapong, and saw the same thing there. Large group of lay people practicing through the night. So then I realized, this is something quite unique, I think, in the world. People being willing to stay up practicing all night long. It's not unique in Thailand. Many monasteries in those days, and still to some extent these days, practice this. It's something Ajahn Chah encouraged, partly because he said it would increase people's faith in the practice and their belief in their own ability to practice. The Buddha said this quality of faith or conviction, saddha, is a power, saddha phala. It's a powerful force, a powerful quality in your mind. Drives you on, it leads directly to energy, effort in the practice, what we call virya, which is another phala, another power. But if you're going to invest time and energy in something, you have to have conviction, that faith that it's worthwhile, it's a good thing, that you can do it and benefit from it, and that it has benefited other people. So it's a vital quality in the practice. So a day like this, a day of practicing meditation for the whole day, keeping 8 precepts, is a practice that brings up faith, conviction in the practice. Of course, it won't mean that you're perfectly mindful or you have deep states of samadhi all day long. Some people may have some good meditation and get into states of calm, samadhi. Some people may have some insight, but also you'll probably experience periods of distraction, agitation, painful joints, painful muscles, periods when your mind is not peaceful, maybe periods when you're sleepy, as well as those periods where you're lucid and your practice seems to be going well. But the overall conclusion you might gain is that practicing for a whole day, putting forth that effort, brings you many good things, teaches you many good things, teaches you about patient effort, teaches you about patiently enduring painful feelings, distracted mind states. And it teaches you that, if you keep putting forth effort, sooner or later you'll see some of the results of that. At some point your mind may settle down and let go of everything for a period of time, and you experience the mind that is bright, happy, calm, maybe with piti and sukha, rapture and contentment arising. And you may even experience periods where you have some insight into the three characteristics, seeing the impermanence of your own feelings and thoughts and memories, or an insight into dukkha, recognizing dukkha as dukkha with mindfulness rather than just reacting to it with displeasure. And the hardest of all, but still possible, you may have some insight into non-self in your practice. Recognizing that a previously attached to self, maybe a mood you had earlier in the day has now passed, has gone. And that self that arose with that mood or that mind state has changed. So then it couldn't be a lasting, permanent self if it's changed and gone. Or you may have some insight into the emptiness or the selfless nature of your physical body. Seeing feelings arising, passing away, or investigating parts of the body and realizing they're not really you. All of these are possible. And they both increase our faith through the practice, and the faith increases our efforts and feeds back into more faith. It's interesting that one of the ways the Buddha described the mind of a stream enterer, Sotapanna, is that their faith in the Buddha and his enlightenment, in the Dhamma, in the Sangha, in the path of practice is established. It's unshakable. It doesn't degenerate anymore, whatever happens. So a noble one, they keep the precepts. If they're a monk, they keep the Vinaya. If they're a layperson, they keep the precepts. They say even on pain of death. Sometimes we discuss about the precepts and how committed we are to the precepts or not. Or maybe we have some reservations about keeping precepts in certain situations, under certain conditions. But the Sotapanna is pretty much committed and they've normalized the practice of the 5 precepts, so they don't doubt anymore about keeping precepts and the benefit of it. So they no longer ask questions about, how to deal with termites or other pests. They don't consider killing as an option. That doesn't come into the conversation. They look for other ways to solve the problem because they don't break their precepts. If they are a layperson, they're keeping the 5 precepts. They don't consider having a relationship outside their normal partner or their marriage. They don't consider sexual misconduct. They don't consider any form of stealing or corruption as an option. the stream enterer has established their faith in Buddha Dhamma Sangha and established their practice of the precepts, so they're just normal. And practicing like we have been today, these are the kinds of efforts we make that are bringing those qualities up in the mind, making the mind firm. Firm in the practice of precepts, firm in the practice of dana, renunciation, sacrifice, charity, generosity. Making the mind firm in samadhi, by repeatedly putting effort into sitting meditation, walking meditation, going through those periods where the different moods come up, putting up with painful feelings, putting up with the dukkha of the practice, the stress, the suffering of the practice, and then gathering all one's mental energy and effort together, and so the mind may settle down, become firm, steady in samadhi, and let go of the hindrances, and go to a very quiet place where it's detached and experiencing what we call emptiness, where the mind is not grasping or clinging on to anything with craving at that time. And that mind that is firm and steady can see the Dhamma, at least partially or for some periods of time. Can really investigate and examine the truth and say, oh, this body is really something that is impermanent. It's not a self. I don't own it. Can't control it. Feelings are the same. Feelings are conditioned things that arise according to their own certain set of conditions. A pleasant feeling arises when the conditions are right. So if you're experiencing pain in your legs when you're sitting, that long period of sitting has brought up some pain, so that's the condition, so you have a painful feeling. But then when you get up and stretch your legs, the painful feeling goes and you feel pleasure, the pleasure of no pain in your muscles. But that's not a self or a person, a being, me, you, mine, us or them. That is just feeling arising due to causes and conditions and then passing away. And when the mind is firm in samadhi, mindfulness is there, you can contemplate and see that. You can see the mind that is what it's like when it's not in samadhi. When we don't have much mindfulness, we tend to just react with our moods, our craving all the time. So we're moving towards what we like and away from what we don't like. That's the suffering of the unenlightened mind. But the mind of samadhi, Ajahn Chah used to say, if you experience some samadhi, some one-pointedness, you're a little bit closer to nibbana because you're experiencing the mind that is free. It may only be temporarily free, but it's free nonetheless from craving, from the hindrances, from craving. And that freedom, that liberation, is something that teaches us that it's possible, that we can experience, and gives us a reflection that we can use, even if our state of samadhi disappears and we're back to a mind that is full of worries, agitation, restlessness, anger, desire. We have our previous experience of the peaceful mind to balance that, and as a standard, as a measuring standard, that we can look at our mental experience afterwards and say, now I'm moving away from the path, my mind's getting more agitated, or I'm moving towards the path and then the agitation is subsiding because I'm letting go of negative mind states. So samadhi is the basis for wisdom, insight to arise, clear seeing of the way things are, non-delusion. So this is why practicing for a day like this, many hours, is so valuable, because you can experience improved mindfulness, some clarity which will bring you insight, which leads you to wisdom, panya barami. And panya barami, wisdom, is knowledge that liberates you from suffering and prevents you falling into further suffering. It prevents further craving and attachment arising. One of the features of wisdom is that it doesn't leave you. If you really know, understand something, it stays. Some of that knowledge stays with you all the time. So even though samadhi comes and goes, sometimes you're peaceful, sometimes you're not. But the wisdom you're gaining from the practice, some of that will stay. And that becomes, we say, bharami, it becomes part of you. So if you do many retreats and put in regular effort into your meditation and practicing mindfulness in daily life and keeping precepts, little by little, Panya Bharami grows, and you're no longer, or you're not so deluded by your craving and attachment. You understand things better, so your mind inclines towards peace and away from dukkha and the causes of dukkha. Going back to northeast Thailand, it's interesting that many of the meditation masters of the last 100 years have been born and lived in northeast Thailand. Not all of them, many around other parts of Thailand, of course, but there's a high predominance of monks and nuns who have practiced meditation and realized the Four Noble Truths in northeast Thailand. But of course it's a place where there's a lot of poverty. Traditionally there's been a lot of poverty, undeveloped economy, there's been a farming, agrarian economy. Often lack of education, lack of medical care available because the population was so poor. And yet it's produced all these wise, enlightened people. Why is that? Well, perhaps the stresses and the pains of life are actually food for contemplation when treated correctly. They have their faith established because they have these good teachers. The practice of the good teachers reinforces the faith of the students, the laity. So they channel that faith into practice, and they've learned to deal with some of the difficulties of life, but using the path of practice to understand dukkha and get beyond dukkha. We see one of the problems we have nowadays is that we have so many options and so much comfort and material wealth surrounding us that even though we still all experience some dukkha in our lives, some pain, some disappointment, some unpleasant experiences, it's so easy to escape from it into distraction. It's so easy just to relieve your mind of boredom by doing the next thing, the next activity, eating the next meal, watching the next thing on your screen, contacting this person or that person. We're always moving away from the present moment into distraction because it's available. That's what material success brings us. We don't have to put up with much dukkha or much pain if we don't want. And the more wealth we have, generally the less we want to put up with dukkha, because we associate wealth and success with minimal dukkha. If you're wealthy, then you don't have to put up with waiting for anything, you don't have to put up with unpleasant feelings, experiences, sensations. You can get rid of anything unpleasant in your life. The more wealth, the more success and power you have. And that's addictive, so we tend to go that way. We all want more wealth, more power, more success, more fame and fortune, so we don't have to put up with any dukkha. But what you're learning, say on an occasion like today, is you're learning to, rather than just running away from dukkha into comfort and distraction, is to learn from dukkha. To learn to get beyond it by comprehending it and revealing what its cause is and abandoning the cause. But to reveal the cause, which is craving and attachment, we have to also recognize dukkha for what it is. So dukkha is to be comprehended. So all those moments when you have the painful legs, or the moments when your mind is not peaceful and you're getting frustrated because it won't settle down, it won't concentrate, it's not calm. They are your teachers. They can help you to comprehend the dukkha of attachment and help you in your search to look, well, what's the real problem? Well, the problem is that craving, the wanting, the not wanting. That's where dukkha comes from. And this practice we've been doing is revealing that. So you're learning all the time. Even when you have dukkha, you can learn. One of the characteristics of the practice is that, of course, you do become a little bit more peaceful the more you practice. You understand how to calm your mind. You keep the precepts more effectively, more habitually. Well, that gives you a lot of happiness, the happiness of a mind that's free from remorse, free from guilt, because you're not causing any bad karma with anyone. As you develop more mindfulness and meditation, you can experience states of calm. The sense of well-being and happiness improves the more we practice. But you have to be on the ball or on your guard, because that can also be a cause for craving and dukkha. It's just of a more refined nature. So we have to employ the same reflections and the same practices at every level of the path of practice. So if you do experience some peace and happiness from your samadhi, you also have to stop and question that and examine that. Is this the cause for more dukkha? As we all know, you might have a nice peaceful period of meditation, and as you come out of it, you start to receive impingement through your senses, so there's sounds and people talking and things happening, duties and obligations you have to perform, responsibilities, so you can't just keep your nice peaceful state, you have to go out and do things. And many people experience anger, irritation, because they've lost their nice peaceful state. Why is that? Oh, because we were attaching to it. And that's the basis for craving. We crave that peaceful state. We want it back again. We want to hold on to it. So even though we've experienced progress in the practice, there's still some subtle dukkha there, isn't there? The dukkha of attaching to states of peace and happiness, wanting them to last longer, wanting to keep them. So some people even become a little bit timid. They meditate more and they don't want to go out and experience the world anymore. If it's a monk, or maybe the monk wants to stay in his hut or his cave and can't be bothered getting involved with the world. But there's a subtle aversion there, isn't there? Lay people are the same. We can have this really blissful meditation and our mindfulness is strong, but as we finish the meditation, then we start to get irritable again. Feel disappointed that we can't just have that nice blissful state all the time. This is the subtle dukkha, or suffering of the practitioner, the meditator. You have to contemplate it. Sometimes people do experience deep states of jhana, which is a very wholesome state. It's the result of maybe many hours, days, weeks, months, years of practice, much effort in the practice, and it's a good thing, it's a wholesome thing. But then even jhana can be a basis for attachment. And they say generally many of those practitioners who go on to experience what we call the arupa jhanas, the formless jhanas, one of their motivations is the irritation with the four rupa jhanas, the jhanas based on form. They still find them coarse. When the mind comes out of jhana, still subject to sounds and sights and sensual distractions. So they are motivated to develop the arupa jhanas, partly out of a form of very subtle aversion. So at the very highest levels of samadhi, there can still be attachment there, sense of self, sense of aversion, desire, clinging. So it's not like you reach a point and then you don't have to contemplate anymore. The Buddha said we have to contemplate at every level, at every point in our practice. which is why Luang Por Chah grounded us in this right view, reflecting on the Four Noble Truths and getting that kind of established in your mind. Whether you're peaceful, you contemplate, or it's not sure. If it's not peaceful, it's not sure. It changes. Your mind state changes. If you have a very wholesome mind state, you're full of kindness and compassion, it's not sure. If you're full of anger, it's not sure. Your anger can disappear just as your peace and thoughts of kindness and compassion can disappear. They're not sure. But that reflection on not sure, the impermanence of conditions, that's wisdom helping you to see the Four Noble Truths in practice. Even attaching to a state of generosity or kindness can become dukkha, can become suffering because of attachment. It's the craving, the attachment that we have to expose, and by reflecting, it's not sure. Whatever's not sure, we shouldn't invest too much self or attachment in, because it's not sure. It can change. Conditions change. This body is constantly changing. Our mental states and the feelings coming with them, pleasant, unpleasant, are changing. So Ajahn Chah encouraged us to keep reflecting on this, the uncertainty of experience, even when the mind is very peaceful. That's good, but it's not sure. Don't form a self around that peace, because you might get disappointed when it changes. So Ajahn Chah encouraged us to keep practicing like this, reflecting on the Four Noble Truths. And when you're meditating like this, sitting meditation, observing and understanding the Four Noble Truths, walking, understanding, penetrating the Four Noble Truths, chanting you can. You'll notice your mind, one day you really want to chant, you like the chants, that day you're inspired, you have strong faith and you chant loudly, and then another day you hate chanting. It's a distraction, it's too much trouble, it's annoying, you don't want to chant. Your mind changes, doesn't it? The chanting doesn't change, it's your mind that changes. Meditation the same. One day you want to meditate, you're inspired, your faith is strong, and the next day it's gone. Don't want to meditate, fed up with it. But if you keep going, you keep practicing, you learn not to buy into those mental states, those moods fed by craving. You establish at least some mindfulness and you reflect, it's not sure, don't believe it, don't just attach to that mood. I like it today, I don't like it tomorrow. Well, just watch. You just keep watching and observing the changing mind, but without buying into it, believing it, attaching to it. That's where real wisdom comes from, real penetration of the Four Noble Truths. You see, it's not sure. Every opinion you form, it may be correct, that opinion may be based on true understanding, but it may not. It may change. One day you're saying, I think chanting is a really awful practice. I never want to chant again. Maybe 6 months later you're saying, the chanting really helps me. Gets up energy, it keeps me going when I'm not very strong in the practice. Or one day you say, this walking meditation, it's just too difficult. I just want to sit. I don't want to have any impingement, don't want to move around, just want to sit and be still. 6 months later you might be saying, this walking meditation really helps me. It helps me get through my sleepiness, helps keep my meditation going, my mindfulness becomes stronger because of the walking meditation. The more you practice, the more you realize you have to maintain right view, focused on the Four Noble Truths at the center. And then the changing conditions of your mind, your body, your posture, how healthy or strong your body is, your mind states, and then the different views and opinions you form, they're the things that are changing, whirling around, the different feelings you have, pleasure, pain. They're all whirling around. It's the reflection on the Four Noble Truths that kind of grounds you with right view in the center. And the more you develop some mindfulness and reflect on the Four Noble Truths, then it exposes the movement and the uncertainty of everything else. And in brief, you say, well, these 5 khandhas, this body, feelings, perceptions, thought formation, sense consciousness, they're the basis of suffering when you cling to them. You have craving and clinging, you identify with them as self, you suffer. When I drop that clinging and craving, there's no suffering, there's no heavy burden. So the more you practice, the more you realize the way out of suffering is developing insight into the Four Noble Truths and not grasping at and clinging on to experience. Observing experience, learning, but then letting go. When we let go, the mind feels light, happy. If we let go a lot, and then we feel very happy, experience the peace of an empty mind, empty because we've let go. And in Ajahn Chah's terms again, the mind that is established in mindfulness and letting go of craving and attachment is your real home, your real abiding place or dwelling place, where mindfulness and wisdom are present and the mind is not clinging or identifying with the 5 khandhas. That's a real place, a real refuge, because nothing can take that away from you. It can't be stolen or destroyed by earthquakes and floods and fires. Other people can't take it away. The wisdom you gain from your practice is yours. Of course, you don't attach to the wisdom as self, so the sense of that wisdom belonging to you disappears. But if you look at it in a conventional way, it's yours. That's your real wealth. We say spiritual wealth, Arya Sap on the inside. It's what you really own and sticks with you. It's your barami. Everything else is uncertain, not sure. Material wealth, pleasant experiences, knowledge, views, memories, not sure. But the insight into the Four Noble Truths is what's really sure, really certain in your mind. So it's your real home, your real refuge. So maybe I'll finish the teaching there for today. And in a moment we are having a ceremony where you will ask forgiveness from the Sangha, which is traditional to do at this time of year, at the end of the Vasa. Having practiced for a Vasa together, even though this Vasa mostly it was online, with just small numbers of people visiting the monastery, we've still practiced together. So it's one of our traditions for the laity to ask forgiveness from the Sangha at the end of the retreat. And also, it's a day we're dedicating the merits of our practice to our parents, grandparents, ancestors and relatives, sharing the merits of all the good that you've been doing today, keeping the precepts, meditating, offering dana, reflecting on the Dhamma, listening to the Dhamma. This is all good karma, this is all merit that we can share. And the Buddha encouraged us to practice gratitude, to appreciate that we have all been dependent on parents, grandparents, friends, relatives from the past who have helped us get to where we are today, to get us to this point where we can practice. We have this opportunity to listen to Dhamma, practice the Dhamma. This is come about through the skillful actions of many people in the past. And the Buddha pointed out, it's a wise person who recognizes that and thinks with gratitude back to those people who've helped them. So that's how we're going to end this retreat, by offering Bangsakula robes and sharing the merit with our parents, grandparents, ancestors and relatives, in memory of them, sharing the merits of today with them. So I'll finish the talk here and then we can do the ceremony.